And the circle. All right, you're live.
The mic's not on.
No, the mics. There we go. Try.
Okay, all right. We are here today for a special, I guess, emergency meeting of the Budget and Grants Committee of the Cleveland Community Police Commission. It is June 24th, 12:02 p.m. The agenda is to look at a response to an RFP for the grants management for our grants program. That's the only item on the agenda, and we'd like to get this done today so we can bring it to the full commission for a vote on Wednesday. And so we have present Commissioner Kennedy and Commissioner Van Leer. And with that, any questions or thoughts about the agenda besides what we already said? All right. So we have a response from the United Black Fund to manage our grants program. I don't know what the best way to do this is, but I had a few questions. I don't know, Kate, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have one, but you can
Yeah.
please start.
Jason, are you going to join us? Anyway, so one question I had was, what is the exact amount that we have to grant? Because we're looking at, they had proposed 10% of the full amount, or $100,000. They put both amounts in there. And so we have more than $1 million, so it actually technically would be more than $100,000 unless we say $100,000. So I know Jason had the full amount of the grant, and he was going to provide that, of the grants.
Also, Pete, I wonder if they were saying that their proposed fee was $100,000, and the way that they calculated it was approximately 10%. So that actually might be a question for UBF. Is were you just kind of like quote unquote showing math, or are you saying that
10%?
You want like actual 10%?
What does their budget say in terms of the budget document they supplied? They broke down all their costs on there.
Mm-hmm.
They based it off $1 million though, because they didn't have the exact figure, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that might be a good follow-up
Do you have that
question.
in front of you, or?
No, I don't. But what I would say,
I just have it.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I don't have it open because of my email.
It's the total is $1 million exactly that they have in their budget.
Oh, okay.
Okay, to the chair, I would say that if we were to run with a contract with this vendor, we would go with the budget they are supplying.
Okay. But we can,
They could submit an updated budget, but I would say we would have to run with the budget they supply.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Well, the budget they supplied is not distributing the full amount of funding. That's the only problem with that.
Okay, we'll just have to confirm with them and make sure that we're clear on that. I should have that. The email's kind of messed up, so I'm sort of don't have it open.
I have it open. If you need me to.
To the chair, quick question for you. I guess for you two to determine today, would it change your passage of this if it was 10% of the 1 million, roughly 200,000, or if it was, because I think you can just forward it,
It's not gonna be 200,000.
Well, it's 1,200,000 roughly is the grant allotted funds for 2024. So if the 10% is a fixed number, I think that's the question you'd have to decide is, does it matter if it's 10% of the higher?
I would certainly prefer it to be 10% of $1 million, because that's more money to go to community, but it's not. What is the amount? Like, what is 10%?
Right. I think, and also if we're going to bring it in front of the full commission, we have to have the precise number. So that's just on our list of questions to ask them. I don't think, Jason, to your point, it's not a deal breaker, but we just need to know the precise figure because our colleagues will ask, as they should.
So if it's 1.2 million, is that the total, or is it about 1.2 million?
What's about?
So it's 1.2 million is 120,000. It's extra $20,000. So we can reach out to them but we can say we'll approve it either way. We just need to get clarity on what their intention is. I'm looking at the budget now. Okay, so that was one question I had. And I'm assuming we'll need to go to city council to approve this, or do we have this money as 1.2 million and we can do with it what we need?
Well, to the chair, we'll need city council approval because it's over
More than
50,000.
50,000, that's, yeah.
So you have 1,154,604 is the exact dollar amount for grants this year.
Okay, 1,154,604.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we can clarify that with a call to them and make sure we have the right information. Okay. Another question I had sort of for them, but I want to see if this is something that concerns you all. Part of our creating impact report. We'll assess changes in police involvement in program participants' lives. So I think that's a great thing to measure, but within a year, like, are you really going to measure that? Is that a realistic thing to try to measure within a year?
Right, and that's also, and maybe I'm overthinking it, which is certainly possible, but an impact report to me is a whole nother project. In other words, to do it well, to do it right, it's like a whole nother project that would probably cost like a whole other bucket of money, in my opinion, because the 10% really needs to be devoted to managing the grants successfully. Unless what they mean by the impact report is compiling the results from the grant report that the grantees submit. In other words, just like compiling all of the things that the grantees send to us about this is what we did with the money, this is the impact that the funds made. That's certainly possible, but maybe it's just the phrasing impact report that makes that to me is like almost like a program evaluation in a way, and that's like a whole nother thing.
So that's a clarification we can make with them and see what they're thinking about that. All right, the deadlines I had. What did y'all think? October, in terms of the release for RFPs, early October, I guess, and then October 31st deadline. Same sort of realistic, but is that doable in our timeline? If we get all the grant applications by October 31st, what did we do this past year? It was earlier than that, but then it took us a long time to review them.
To the chair, I'm thinking, why are we waiting until October? It's not even July yet, and we want to move up the timeline as much as possible. And we know that it's going to be a bumpy road trying to shift this process over to an outside vendor. I know that it's going to take time to develop the contract and to execute the contract with whoever this committee selects, but that doesn't mean that we can't issue an award letter and then they can start the work if they feel like they want to, while we work on the contract in the background. So I just feel like getting started in October on actually soliciting applications might be a little bit of a too far out of the timeline. But that's just my personal opinion.
Mr. Kennedy, do you have any thoughts?
I'm just rereading your email with your questions, Pete. I agree that October feels a little late. But am I correct, in assuming that we're just not sure how long it's gonna take to like onboard this vendor? And that could be like part of the reason why why October was chosen?
Through the chair to the commissioner, they had an outline of what they were going to be doing from like August until October. And a lot of it seemed like really soft touch points in terms of getting to know the commission and talking about what we need. And it, in my personal opinion, it seemed a little prolonged.
Yeah.
I feel like we can fast track that because I know that we have such a priority in trying to get this work done and get it done earlier than we did last year. So we're not facing a time crunch at the end. So that's just, you know, maybe we can meet with them and say, hey, are you open to moving the timeline up a little bit if we can fast track this, if we can make good progress on executing the contract between us and you. I think it really could evolve more quickly than they're anticipating.
Thank you.
I mean, so we could look at, say, a early September release of, I mean, because just getting it out there, as long as they can set up their management program to deal with applications that come in mid-September or something, you know, we could release the notice and, you know, people are not going to apply right away, so.
To the chair, for some context, we would, at community development where I worked previously, we had our emergency solution grant program grants that were on a similar cycle as to this you guys have set up. We would be releasing that RFP for applicants usually like around that August, September time, you know, and making sure, and we had to make sure a lot of those contracts were done by the end of the year shutdown.
Right.
So that feels a little bit more safe to me.
Okay. It would be then thinking about a early October then deadline, so that we could.
Correct.
Okay, well, we'll have that conversation with them and make sure that, and if not, we'll have to.
Because then you're thinking October with the RFP results, scoring with the help of the committee, then vote by the full commission in November, then December. You know, it doesn't leave a lot of time for contracting with a shutdown right then.
Once the motion is done, they should be able to procure the money. So that's how it worked this last year is that's why contracts are still going, because once the motion is done to appropriate the money, they were able to encumber it into a fund as the contracts are completed. So if that holds true this year, so long as the motion to approve the grantee list is done before the cutoff, we should be okay. If they did it in the year before, they should be able to repeat that this year.
When you're saying the motion to encumber the whole.
So what you have to have is a motion from the full commission that lists the grantees, right? Which are the vendors, and the dollar amount that is being appropriated to each vendor. That is what the specific motion has to have. Then they can procure the money in the system and attach it to that while the contracts are being finalized. So that's what we've been like. Now, you know, granted, I would love to see us under contract before the end of the year, like with the lessons we've learned from this year. So that may be doable if we get all the needed paperwork up front. And we have a new standardized contract, which Martin has been working on. I know that's a little ready to go.
And Chair, don't forget that if the commission wants to consider awarding an entity over $50,000, that would also need to be approved by council before that shutdown.
Right.
And getting on that schedule is a nightmare. So that's why I really recommend moving up the timeline.
Right. Okay. My next question was around site visits for all applicants. Seems like that's a lot. So I'm not sure we would require that. What did we do this last time? We didn't do site visits for everybody.
No, so anything the vendor wants to put in for that price that they feel they can do, I would not hesitate to allow them. Like if they want to do an impact report and they feel that's within their budget, then I would accept it, because that's what they said they can do for that 100 and some change. So, the site visits are logistically challenging. I think it's something council has asked us to do. So if a vendor could, assist in that by doing site reports or pairing with commissioners, that would be, advantageous to us. But you can make it as a,
Monitoring.
you can do it as a random sample, not a guarantee that you have to visit every site. You can do there. It doesn't have to be a guaranteed for every site kind of thing.
Yeah, it seemed like whenever we were talking about site visits before, it was also after they were given the money, right? Wasn't that? what we were
Right.
talking
So they
about?
would have their 2-time reporting requirement, their 6-month and their 1-year reporting requirement. So you can do it any time between there. But they are part of an auditing thing. So someone sending you a paper report with some pictures saying we did these things is not the same as going to see, their buildings, their facilities, their programs directly. So
Okay, and there was also, they had said January 2025 for first disbursement. Is that a realistic timeline? What's a realistic timeline?
To the chair, no, that's not a realistic timeline. I think that maybe if every single star aligned, that could possibly be a realistic timeline, but it's not. And that's, stars always aligning is not realistic. So I would say if that depends on the conversation about moving up the awarding timeline, right? So if we're able to move up the awarding timeline, that may be. And that's, I would say first disbursements could probably be happening probably like around February.
and you can also say, right, disbursements are staggered. That's a given too. So some people get into contract faster than others. So it wouldn't be like everybody's on the same. So you would start with, disbursements could happen as early as and continue throughout the entire, program.
Okay.
One, just looking at the 2025 activities that they outlined. So to your point, Martin, what would be more helpful to us is if they helped us chase down contracts and signatures, right? That's a huge lift, and that's what we need help with. And that's my number one concern about this process moving forward. So, in my opinion, respectfully, I think that should be their sole focus until every single contract is executed. And I don't expect a vendor to know that level, that intimate detail, right? Because our grants process is really specific to us in many ways. It's very unusual in many different regards. So I wouldn't expect this to be in there. But just flagging my first kind of flag about the activities breakdown is one, that their sole focus as it relates to the work that they're doing for us needs to be chasing down contracts and necessary documentation. And then in terms of monitor grantees, continue monitoring, I would love to know what that means exactly, what that means, how they would do that, what monitoring honestly even needs to take place during those months, or if there's another better use of their time as it relates to the hours that they're putting aside for us. And I think another thing that I would like to see on their 2025 workload is, right, probably it looks like, let's just say hypothetically, that in March, everyone has signed their contract. Everyone is official, as it were. In addition to whatever monitoring takes place, it would be really great if they started, for example, like working on the grantee survey that we would send out to grantees after the grant period, because that would be most helpful to us. And their summer activities are like pretty lean. Does anyone have any reactions?
Could you say that again, the last two things you said?
Yeah. So the first thing was chase down contracts. The second thing was, what does monitoring look like, and like what level of monitoring is necessary, other than, because a 6-month written report, a 12-month written report, and a site visit, that's a lot of monitoring. In my experience, like on the grantee side, I've never had to do that much reporting before. And granted, these are public dollars, it's like a little different. So more monitoring is like totally okay, but that's like a lot. So what does monitoring look like, and like what's the best use of UBS time? And then the third thing is adding in here work on like updating the grantee survey and getting ready to distribute it at the end of the grant period in 2025.
To the chair, when you're done typing, I don't want to overwhelm you with commentary. Responding to the commissioner, I think that I agree that setting contract execution should be a priority. I don't think it should be a sole focus, because at the same time, when grantees are executing contracts, they're immediately beginning to send their reimbursements or their requests for advances. So they have to juggle with the ones that are moving forward, and then also stick with the priority of trying to get the ones that are not under contract up. But there would be nothing worse than sitting there being like, nah, we can't process your payment request because some other person hasn't finished their contract.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I didn't mean that like they literally can't do anything else, but I'm just talking about priorities, not literal workflow, I guess.
Okay. And to your second point about what is monitoring and how much monitoring is required, I think that a really good starting point for us in trying to transfer some of these duties over to the vendor that we select would be to create like a how-to guide or like an expectations guide on grant management for our like internal purposes, like what we're willing to accept, what we're not willing to accept, and we can outline things like, here's the type of monitoring that we would expect, here's the type of not the type of reports, but like along the lines of reporting that we're thinking. Sort of setting minimum standards and like helpful tips for them, like we don't accept this type, we don't allow them to bill or reimburse for this type of insurance or something like that. So maybe we can create like a little policies and procedures manual as like a handoff thing for them to include specific details like that. And in terms of my experience in working with monitoring at the federal level for community development involved monthly reporting, where they would submit monthly summaries of what is occurring on the ground. They would submit monthly numbers in terms of persons served, and then they would also submit their reimbursement documents. And then we would go out for a site visit with a site visit checklist at least once per the grant reporting period for high risk numbers, because we had so many. You know,
Right.
Obviously there's a lot fewer number in this batch.
Right.
But we would say, you know, you're at least going out there one time for each grantee with a checklist and going through important stuff. Like, let me see your financials, and also let me see the thing actually occurring, right? So keeping eyes on the actual activity itself. So I'm envisioning their monitoring is going to look like reviewing the 6-month and the 12-month reports, reconciling all of the payments to make sure that they all make sense, and then going out for at least one site visit with a site visit checklist form.
Love it. And also keeping in mind the example you gave on the monitoring side for those federal grants, notoriously crazy requirements,
Yes.
of course, is our focus, right, as it's stated in the charter, I believe, is for grassroots organizations. And imagine doing that level of reporting for a grassroots organization. It's just like, So I'm on a little, just being transparent, I'm a little more on the protective of their time side of the grantees. Especially because our contracting process is so difficult, that it's just like, the fact that they have to go through that really honestly just like irks me. But beyond that, I just want to be protective of their time. The other, I'm reading the bullet on the impact report, and it says the report will include participant demographics and assess changes in police involvement in program participants' lives. Programs will complete and submit this form monthly to UBF. To my point, that's probably like that feels like a little much to me.
Yeah.
And I would respectfully ask that to be striked from like their workload. Jason, to your point, right? It's like, okay, if UBF feels like they can do this work for the $100,000 that they requested, that's one thing. But this also starts to impact the grantee's time, in which case we would need to intervene.
Well, look, to the chair, to the commissioner, through the chair, I think we can come to a solid solution in like the proposal or like the manual that we're gonna give them with their input as well.
This could be for anyone, Martin or Jason or Pete. What are the legal parameters around the activities that are outlined in this response versus the activities they're legally obligated to provide us? Does that make sense? So we're suggesting all of these amendments, right? Do those amendments need to be memorialized at any certain point to make sure that we're paying for the services that we actually want? Does that make sense? No.
Say it again, in a different way.
So, okay. So at what point do all these edits that we're making in this meeting, right? At any point, does that need to be memorialized in a document and signed by us and UBF to make sure that they're rendering the services that we actually want?
So when this goes under contract, the commission won't have to sign it, the executive director will sign it, and whatever they say they're gonna do, they're held accountable to. So it's actually an amendment or an attachment to the contract, the proposal itself, right? So it's up to us as a commission staff and commission together to hold them accountable to that. Now, having operationalized some RFPs over the years, some contracts are overly written, in what they're gonna do in their proposal, and then in real life, you make running changes without having to edit the document all the time, right? So you do have some artistic license to just work with the vendor on a day-to-day basis, so long as you feel as the person who the services are being provided to at the end, they met their contractual obligation, it's okay. So that's the best way I can describe it operationally. So it's gonna say a lot of things in the final contract. You can hold them accountable for those things, but in the day-to-day, there's always compromises made where they say, okay, well, we didn't think of this, or let's add this, and it's up between you and the vendor to do that.
Yeah, and to the chair, through the commissioner, through the chair, they took no exceptions to what we put in our RFP. So whatever we said in our RFP stands. And then what I see in their proposal is being like, okay, here's how we're actually going to do it, kind of additional stuff that they're going to be doing. And at any point we could tell them, hey, we don't want you to do that. We don't need that. Don't need to do that. Don't need to do this. So we'll just follow up with them on that. But I think really what's going to be incorporated is our RFP and their response, and that's the contract.
The only thing that can't change is the money. So you can't
Of course.
you can't add more work that would incur cost on them. That's the main sticking point would be money, right? a lot of times if organizations are over ambitious in their RFQs, sometimes they have to eat that, because they said they were gonna do something, they calculated too low, and that's just
Right.
the way that it goes,
Right.
But it's ultimately up to you all to, take things off their list if it feels like it's too cumbersome for everybody. That's certainly acceptable.
Right. And I guess I'm sort of thinking about this, and maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but I'm thinking about this document as a statement of work, like an SOW in a way, and between the vendor, right, and the person hiring the vendor, if there are significant changes to that SOW, then sometimes the price changes. And so, or, you know what I mean? Or just like the scope of work changes, so the vendor has to make changes. And if what you're telling me is that legally speaking, it seems quite flexible, then that's very helpful information. However, I think it would behoove us to just memorialize some of these things for clarity.
Sure. And that's where you are now. So because you have only one vendor that applied, right? You now have the ability to directly negotiate with them. The only thing is, you would have to pick one or the other of the two of you. Otherwise, we'd have to have it a public meeting because we're such a small committee right now that it would be a quorum. So, at the end of the meeting today, obviously there's some negotiation that needs to be done between UBF and the commission. So just designate, one commissioner on behalf, and then of course Martin and I can always accompany you on that if you need us to support you. And I suggest we, very quickly sit down with them and work these things out. And then what they can do is they can update the scope of work using your language, right? And that's what we would put in the final contract.
Yeah. That would be my strong preference, but is that something you'd be comfortable with?
Which, the language?
Like updating the scope
Yeah.
of work and having
Yeah.
that included in the
I
final
think we
contract.
need to make it clear, yeah. Okay. Well, those remind me, I had the question about what a CDTO is, but I don't know if anybody knows that. Can ask
What's the
that.
context of that?
By the CDTO advocacy/lobbying session.
They said, to the chair, they said that they have additional services that they provide each grantee that they work with all of their programming that helps nonprofit leaders be able to develop their skills in order to run their nonprofits more efficiently, in order to lobby and advocate for more funding. And this is a service that they would provide to all of the grantees that are coming through our shop as well.
That's great.
That would be rad. Love that.
Okay. So, with the conversation that will happen in the final contract, are we able to move this forward? Are there any did you have any other questions? You already sort of raised yours, or was there a different one?
My only other question would be, UBF is obviously very experienced at distributing and monitoring their own grantees. Just out of curiosity, this is not a requirement, of course, but I'd be curious if they've done a service like this for any other organizations. In other words, managed grants and grantees for an organization that's outside of UBF, right?
That's what we have to ask them.
Yeah.
To the chair, the only other comment I had was that there are some minor questions and items that are outlined in their budget I don't think we'd be able to reimburse for, or we need them to reorganize. Things like, FICA, and we have trouble paying those kinds of things. Overall insurances, when we're asking them for specific things. And also it looks like for professional fees, they have some things like accountant or grants compliance billed separately instead of under personnel. So I don't understand, are those like subcontracts? Are those, we would need, there's a bunch of budget stuff that I would need to, that would need to be modified before we can enter into before we enter into a contract with them, but we can handle that at the next stage.
And then just to clarify, the way that we would hypothetically pay UBF is that they would do the reimbursement scenario. They would bill the city for certain services at certain times and then basically have that invoice fulfilled.
Yeah, how it would work to the commissioner through the chair is they would do the work and then they would submit reimbursement requests detailing how much from each one of the line items in their budget have they expended, showing us receipts of actually expending those items. So for like personnel, they're giving us payroll and timesheets. They're for subcontracts, they're giving us copies of the subcontract, invoices and payment to that subcontractor. Any sort of items that they're purchasing, they have to give us receipts of that, and then we'd be able to reimburse them for those costs.
Most of them do it monthly, so they'll send monthly invoices with the attachments necessary to support the invoice.
And I'm sure they're aware of this, but that would also be a good thing to kind of reiterate in communicating with them, just like, hey, reiterating that because you're going to be billing us on a monthly basis, it would kind of sort of like behoove you to think about, okay, would this be easily reimbursable or not?
If it's not in the budget, it's not gonna count.
Right.
That's number one rule.
Right. Oh, yes. No, I understand. But I'm talking about like before the contract gets signed.
Yeah, to the commissioner, through the chair, I think the first step really is settling the budget, right? So,
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah, settling the budget.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we move forward? I mean, we want to put this to the commission for approval, with the understanding that we have to finalize the contract with some adjustments. Is that what we want to do here?
Before we get to that step, Pete, I wonder, just backing up like a half a step, if we should plan to try to reach out to UBF before the commission meeting on Wednesday. I realize that's in like 48 hours, but to have some of these questions answered. Yeah, okay.
That's what I was
Okay.
thinking, yeah.
And then maybe if we could talk about how we want to go about doing that,
Right.
that would be very helpful for me.
Yes, that was my next step. You're just one step ahead, but that was
I'm
the question.
being like chronological.
No, that's
Sorry.
good. No, that's good. That's great. So yeah, I think we can call them and either have a phone conversation in the next couple of days or figure out if we want to sit down. What do you think? Is that
I think it's doable, and your motion doesn't have to be specific to the exact details of the contract. You can just, the commission can authorize, this Martin, myself, and one commissioner from Budget and Grants to finalize the terms of the contract, not to exceed, whatever the 10% that was the proposed amount, right?
100,000?
Yeah, and that with the anticipation that UBS be the vendor, unless something were to fall through, and then you can even say, to make this motion be more effective, you can even put in there, if negotiations with UBS were to fail, the commission further authorizes that delegation to, because what happens is if the RFQ doesn't go through, you don't have to repost it. You can now engage directly with other organizations to finalize a contract. So, I would also add that in there just as a protection clause for yourselves to not have to go back and wait for the meeting cycle again, to just finish this out either way, to the best of the commission's ability. So when Martin and I looked at it this morning, technically, we wouldn't need to go back to the full commission, except our original motion didn't give finalization authorization. It just gave authorization to do the RFP initially. In the future, we'll do motions from Budget and Grants that's inclusive of both. So we'll get the RFP process approved, and then also in the same motion, delegate the people who will finalize that, so that you don't have to go back with your, and reapprove something that the commission is already approving you to do. So lesson learned there. But I think you can we can come up with a motion that gives the authority to the people to finish this job, with the anticipation it will most likely be, yes.
So Pete, let me ask you this, here, let me propose an idea for how to get this call scheduled with UBF. I can share my availability over email. If UBF for some reason, if we do not have aligned availability, maybe we kind of defer to you to try to basically just trying to align our schedules with UBF. Can staff work to schedule a call with UBF? That would be really helpful for scheduling purposes. And then we can try to get something organized with them before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whichever one of the two you will be the point commissioner knows is the.
Yeah, I mean, share yours and
Yeah.
we'll figure it out. And I can actually call them right after this meeting.
Okay.
Start to figure it out. But if you share me your times and.
Yeah, maybe depending on when we wrap today, maybe we just do it now, and we can try to schedule.
Yeah. And then if it's better, if time works out better for yours, then
Yeah.
you can do it, and I'll do it. All right. Any other questions or thoughts before we? No? Okay. Well, so we have a process. We're going to talk to UBF in the next couple of days before the meeting, and at least initially have the conversation on some of these questions we have, and go to the full commission on Wednesday for approval of this process, and to enter into a contract with them based on our questions and our concerns.
Can we get an official vote on that?
Yeah, we're about to.
Great.
Yes. So I make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Kate, what's your vote?
Aye.
My vote is also aye, so it passes unanimously. And that's it.
All right, awesome.
Great. Well, thank you.